On to our top focus this hour, the Kedarnath chopper crash. Now, interesting details have emerged of what happened the moment when the helicopter carrying 7 pilgrims crashed yesterday. In fact, this is source-based information that we're getting you. The preliminary findings suggest that just about 5 minutes before the crash, 2 other choppers crossed the same path, and the decisions that they took at that time made all the difference. Now, investigations show that the weather was certainly bad. There is no doubt that the visibility was severely impaired, and because of this, 2 of the 3 pilots decided to ascend in the air and fly above the clouds. Now, they landed safely. However, the 3rd pilot chose to descend and fly below the clouds. Now, this unfortunately seems to be the reason why eventually the chopper collided with a hill in Uttarakhand. Now, according to primary reports, the chopper is owned by Delhi-based Aryan Aviation Private Limited, and it was traveling back from Kedarnath when it crashed in just about a few minutes after it took off. Now, preliminary findings also suggest that the presence of an ATC or the air traffic control would not have helped in this situation. Now, what was needed is quick and correct decision making by the pilot. However, only the final report will conclusively determine the actual cause of the accident. Now, that's one aspect of the story. Now, let's take a look at some more details coming in. Now, in June this year, the aviation watchdog DGCA penalized 5 air operators. Now, they have been fined for violating air safety rules. Even the approval of the head of operations was withdrawn for about a period of 3 months. Now, who are these operators and why is it significant in the current scheme of things? Now, these are Aryan Aviation, the same air operator whose chopper crashed yesterday. Now, others include Chipsan Aviation, Pinnacle Air Limited, Thambi Aviation and Kestrel Aviation. Now, let's understand that why these operators were fined. Now, because they didn't comply to the maintenance schedule, that is that they are mandated by law to maintain complete records of the total time flown since the last overhaul and the last time since the inspection was done. And second reason that we're being given to understand is allegedly because they submitted fake logs of the flying hours. So some very serious air safety violations have come to the fore. Now, in fact, in the backdrop of all of these violations and the fine and that has been slapped on these air operators, we also spoke to DGCA about their decision to take action on these operators. Now, to this, they say that the action has been taken in such a manner that is scientifically sound and proportionate to the wrongdoing, as well as it has to be well reasoned. Now, however, in this case, the DGCA has gone on to say that the guidelines such as that of hill training of pilots before operating in such terrain must be looked at. Now, I want to bring in my guests for a perspective on this. Joining me is Dr. Sanath Kaul, former Civil Aviation Joint Secretary, retired Air Vice Marshal Nitin Vaidya, and as well as Captain Amit Singh, founder of the Safety Matters. All of you, thank you so much for joining us here today. I want to go across to Dr. Sanath Kaul first. Sir, you know, everything said and done, this may have been a case of, say, an error in judgment, but can we agree on one very important point, that we need to do more when it comes to checks and balances, you know, as far as the pilots are concerned who are operating in hilly areas? Now, I'll tell you why I'm telling you this, because this pilot that we're talking about is primarily an offshore pilot for the last 15 years. And he switched to hill flying only just about last month. So, you know, flying over a hilly terrain and flying over sea, they're 2 absolutely, you know, different things, and that needs some serious training.
Yes, I agree with you. And the other thing which I want to say is that the concept of helicopters and maintenance, schedules, equipment have to be there. So why has DGCA fined 5 of them is not clear, because I have not seen the report as yet. But obviously, things were not going right with the operators themselves, leave aside the pilot. So it's a serious issue that DGCA, after this unfortunate incident, has gone in and fined 5 companies. On top of that, what you are saying, that the pilot was not used to flying in the hills, and was he given enough uh, time to do a study of hill flying. That's one thing. Whether the other equipment like did they have things like traffic avoidance, the TCAS equipment in their helicopter or not? Was it working? We don't know because there are radars and other equipment which are there, which are very useful for hill flying. And there is traffic avoidance system also, which also TCAS as it is called, is also very important. So we don't know very much from what we read from the newspapers, but at the same time, it is obvious that after having after having an inquiry and then fined 5 lakh each or so from 5 airlines, there seems to be something seriously wrong with the system of helicopter operations, especially in the hill areas. And I think I can't say very much more because, as I said, I have not read the report. I have no idea. I'm only going by what one reads in the newspapers or in the media. Thanks.
So, the report, the primarily findings that we have also indicate that, they're squarely kind of blaming the pilot and error in judgment because, even for the benefit of our viewers, I'd like to make this point clear that they say that there are 3 choppers that were flying on the same route at the same time, and 2 of them decided to go above the cloud, and that's how they managed to circumvent bad weather. And the one pilot that we are talking about decided to fly below the cloud. So, and that they are saying is the reason why it eventually went and crashed. So somewhere they're saying that a quick decision making and more sound decision making is what was needed at that point in time. But I want to also bring in Mr. Nitin Vaidya at this point. Sir, a lot is being said about what the pilot should have done or shouldn't have done, but let's not forget that these are challenging situations. One has to make dynamic calls. I want to know from you, how do pilots decide what's best at that moment? Is it just about skills and training, or is it also a part about presence of mind?
Skill and training is definitely a point of high consideration, which also happens when you keep on flying in such kind of terrains. I am not too certain as to what the actual weather at that point of time was. But when you say that 2 helicopters have flown above the clouds and this captain was flying below the clouds, I must tell you very candidly that in the hills, there is a basic rule of aviation in which it says that you have to fly under visual met conditions, that is VMC, which means that you have to always keep the terrain in contact. Now, with this mandatory action to be done, it would be very difficult to say as to why the first 2 pilots flew above the cloud and this captain insisted on flying below the clouds. But I can definitely tell you that irrespective of what the weather conditions are, which in the hills are extremely dynamic and they keep on changing very rapidly, especially as high as you go. And at 11,000 plus feet where Kedarnath is located, the weather can be extremely challenging. Now, in this kind of a situation, I would like to believe that the pilots have to take a very dynamic call based on what you can actually see the weather in front of you and do maneuvers to see that you keep above or below the clouds depending upon what the terrain below you is, for which experience, skill all matters.
So, Mr. Vaidya, yes, go ahead.
And what is important is that a person has to be very familiar with the terrain in which he is flying. With the kind of inputs that you're giving me, that this pilot was flying offshore and then for the last 1 month he's into the hills, I am not too sure as to what kind of training Aryan Aviation has undertaken to these pilots and what kind of rules definitely would be there in place as far as DGCA is concerned, but what kind of checks DGCA has, whether they have the wherewithal to ensure, like they do for the fixed wing aircraft, that is the commercial aircraft, whether it be any aviation airline, whether it be Air India, SpiceJet, Indigo, the kind of regulations that they follow so strictly, I am not too sure if they are doing it for the helicopter aviation fleets that are flying in India.
So, So, that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make here, the lack of experience. And I don't know whose fault that is. But Mr. Weather, I also want to understand that since we're constantly talking about, bad weather and given the hilly terrain, who authorizes the pilot to, take off? Because given that if the pilot feels that the weather is not suitable for a takeoff, can the pilot decide not to take off?
Yes, absolutely. The responsibility of flying and keeping the aircraft safe is entirely the responsibility of the pilot. So it is his decision whether I should take off or not take off at any point of time. Okay, whether it be a rotary aircraft like the one that was Bell 407 that crashed, or a fixed wing aircraft, whether it be a Boeing series or a Airbus series, the decision whether to take off or not is entirely up to the pilot. Now, what does happen, and I must be very candid in making a statement of this kind, is that at times commercial considerations do come up in terms of taking decisions. Whether it be the directions from the company that you need to come back and do 4 sorties or 3 sorties, or the compulsion of the pilot where he feels that he's confident enough to take off, or that he needs to land at a particular time because that is what the sunset time is. While I must be very candid in saying that it does not happen always, but I cannot overrule the fact that this can happen.
Interesting.
So under these circumstances, it's very difficult for us to come to a definite conclusion at this point of time without knowing what went into this pilot taking a decision that he needs to take off, and this is the weather in front of me.
Interesting.
And at any point of time when you take off, if the weather at that point of time is clear and en route you encounter bad weather, you have the option of either returning or making evasive maneuvers to keep yourself clear of the hills. But then when you are in the hills, it's a very daunting task because you do not really know what kind of topography lies below you in case you are above the clouds or in the clouds.
All the more reason why the pilots should be familiar with, the area that they are flying. Mr. Kaul, the DGCA has clearly admitted that there's need to relook training of, the pilots that fly in the hilly regions. In your experience, how do regulators react to such situations? How do you decide that a particular punishment is good enough, in fact, or will provide as a good enough deterrent? Also, given the fact that, let's remember that Aryan Aviation is, an air operator that has already been penalized, but yet again we're looking at this tragedy.
Okay, the philosophy for aviation, especially with the International Civil Aviation Organization, is that every accident should be a learning thing, not a punishment. You can find fault, but very often when you do inquiries, you find that the pilots, and if they are co-pilots, they tend to not come out with the truth always, because they will, if they are at fault, or if they find, if the inquiry officers find fault with them. Therefore, the concept is that the inquiry should be not fault finding, but to make sure that it doesn't happen again. It should not repeat itself. Now, here they are doing, firstly, they have fined 5 airlines. So obviously there's something wrong with the method they are following. They are probably not following in detail the system which is DGCA has put in place. Plus, I don't know what punishment, if they have taken any particular punishment, given a punishment, or suspended the license of the pilot, that has not come out. So are they coming to any conclusion like that? But the main thing is, what were the steps that they missed, and what are the steps they should ensure for future to fly? As already said, it is a pilot discussion, but then pilots are also, given certain leverage, but at the same time, they are also told that safety comes first. If the flight is not to take place, if it is dangerous, then the flight should not take place. But at the same time, the companies do put pressure, private companies, because for them, every flight is a commercial flight. It means profit, or an aborted flight is a source of loss. So there are issues which are serious and need to be looked into. Well, these are some of my comments, because I know that that at the International Civil Aviation Organization level, they do want to look into it and make amends, make changes to ensure that in future, such whatever happens, I mean, any accident is a source of study and for improvement for the future.
Here to make money. Now, I also want to bring in a consumer voice, Captain Amit Singh. Captain Singh, you've heard both the sides, now, what are your expectations as a consumer? Everyone talks about safety being paramount, but here we are paying so much money for a ride, and at the end, especially those 7 people, they've lost their life.
Safety is only in the books, or when an accident happens like this unfortunate one, then safety is mentioned. Otherwise, it is about making money, profiteering, or surviving in these trying times. We are talking about the fine of 5 lakhs, which was imposed in June on the operators. Now, why was the fine or penalty imposed? Because there was a compromise in safety and irregularity found by the regulator, which may have resulted in safety practices or culture being compromised, the adequate buffers which are there built in the system compromised. Ultimately, it is about the safety of passengers, the crew, the equipment, and environment that regulations are made. Now, every human being cannot be perfect. They make errors, but those errors should not be deliberate. The organizations, they should err on the side of safety, not take undue risks or push the crew into taking undue risks, directly or indirectly. So that is the culture which should prevail in the organization. Similarly, from the regulator's perspective, they have to go to the root cause of the accident to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And accident does not happen out of the blue. There are always precursors. There will be a number of near misses, a few serious incidents, then an accident happens. So what happened in June was a precursor. Something is very wrong in the system, a wake-up call. And the 5 lakh, the penalty which was imposed was not sufficient. So would you rather pay a traffic cop 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees rather than having to go to the court and submit your license, get it suspended? So it is something of that, a corollary of that sort. So the DGCA was empowered in 2020 through a bill which was passed in the parliament, and the level of fine which DGCA can impose goes up to 1 crore. So 5 lakhs is a measly amount in terms of what has been fined. That is kind of saying that we want to continue your operation or let you off and be seen as doing something for the safety. So that is not in the true spirit of safety. So 5 lakh amount is not a deterrent, which a penalty is supposed to be. Not a deterrent for the organization to take it seriously and for others to take a lesson from it. So they paid 5 lakhs. It is written in one of the accident reports after a small trainer aircraft crashed in Telangana. So the accident investigator wrote in the report that the DGCA conducted an audit post that accident because the flying school was closed. So the main purpose of that audit was to restart operations of the flying school and not to prevent that accident. They could have prevented that accident had they conducted the audit in the true spirit. So it is on record that a government officer is making a statement regarding what happens post the accident, just to restart the operations, to impose a fine and say, look, we have taken action and impose a fine. But that is a nominal amount for an organization which loses maybe lakhs per day if the operations are stopped. So rather pay 5 lakh. So that is nothing much for them. So the penalty has to be proportionate to the kind and to the extent of damage or the potential damage or the intent of the organization. So there is no proportionality. We hear terms about scientific and all that stuff, but when you hear about DGCA suspending license of pilots, they do not think twice. 6 months, 3 years, 5 years. So they would be losing crores if a pilot is sitting on ground. But an organization as big as, say, Vistara or Indigo, they've charged 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, which doesn't matter to them. So are we doing some kind of justice? Justice also talks about how the penalty should be imposed and how much delay should be there. If a crime has been committed, then the justice should happen quickly. Otherwise, the purpose of that penalty is lost if there
Right.
is too much time lag or time gap. So similar is the case here. If what necessitated the audit in June was the social media which exposed a hard landing or a risky operation. It is not that DGCA conducted an audit and found irregular flying times. We are talking about the fine of 5 lakhs, which was imposed in June on the operators. Now, why was the fine or penalty imposed? Because there was a compromise in safety and irregularity found by the regulator, which may have resulted in safety practices or culture being compromised, the adequate buffers which are there built in the system compromised. Ultimately, it is about the safety of passengers, the crew, the equipment, and environment that regulations are made. Now, every human being cannot be perfect. They make errors, but those errors should not be deliberate. The organizations, they should err on the side of safety, not take undue risks or push the crew into taking undue risks, directly or indirectly. So that is the culture which should prevail in the organization. Similarly, from the regulator's perspective, they have to go to the root cause of the accident to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And accident does not happen out of the blue. There are always precursors. There will be a number of near misses, few serious incidents, then an accident happens. So what happened in June was a precursor. That something is very wrong in the system, a wake-up call. And the 5 lakh, the penalty which was imposed was not sufficient. So would you rather pay a traffic cop 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees rather than having to go to the court and submit your license, get it suspended? So it is something of that, a corollary of that sort. So the DGCA was empowered in 2020 through a bill which was passed in the parliament, and the level of fine which DGCA can impose goes up to 1 crore. So 5 lakhs is a measly amount in terms of what has been fined. That is kind of saying that we want to continue your operation or let you off and be seen as doing something for the safety. So that is not in the true spirit of safety. So 5 lakh amount is not a deterrent, which a penalty is supposed to be. Not a deterrent for the organization to take it seriously and for others to take a lesson from it. So they paid 5 lakhs. It is written in one of the accident reports after a small trainer aircraft crashed in Telangana. So the accident investigator wrote in the report that the DGCA conducted an audit post that accident because the flying school was closed. So the main purpose of that audit was to restart operations of the flying school and not to prevent that accident. They could have prevented that accident had they conducted the audit in the true spirit. So it is on record that a government officer is making a statement regarding what happens post an accident, just to restart the operations, to impose a fine and say, look, we have taken action and impose a fine. But that is a nominal amount for an organization which loses maybe lakhs per day if the operations are stopped. So rather pay 5 lakh. So that is nothing much for them. So the penalty has to be proportionate to the kind and to the extent of damage or the potential damage or the intent of the organization. So there is no proportionality. We hear terms about scientific and all that stuff, but when you hear about DGCA suspending license of pilots, they do not think twice. 6 months, 3 years, 5 years. So they would be losing crores if a pilot is sitting on ground. But an organization as big as, say, Vistara or Indigo, they've charged 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, which doesn't matter to them. So are we doing some kind of justice? Justice also talks about how the penalty should be imposed and how much delay should be there. If a crime has been committed, then the justice should happen quickly. Otherwise, the purpose of that penalty is lost. If
Right.
there is too much time lag or time gap. So similar is the case here. If what necessitated the audit in June was the social media which exposed a hard landing or a risky operation. It is not that DGCA conducted an audit and found irregularities. They were forced to conduct an audit because of public pressure. So an audit is conducted every year. After an incident, a special audit is conducted. What happens to the findings, nobody knows. They're not revealed.
Right. Captain Singh, I want to take that point to Dr. Kaul. Dr. Kaul, would you like to come in here and, give our viewers a sense of what Captain Singh is saying, that these violations were a precursor to this incident that has taken? Perhaps DGCA should have done more than just, a small a fine in the form of 5 lakh rupees.
Yes, I do agree. I think DGCA should have done more. The second point which he raised was that, and which I had mentioned, was that, the DGCA reports, inquiry reports, are generally not available in the public domain. And what is the learning process after the report? We don't know. In fact, very often a report is kind of suppressed. So this is a very serious issue that DGCA has to have. Firstly, they are talking about an independent inquiry, but I don't know how independent these inquiries are. And second, what is the learning? What are the findings of the inquiry, and what are the issues on which they ensure that these incidents will not take place again, because they are putting certain more restrictions or regulations to ensure that these things don't happen. For example, let's take a famous case of a crash of airlines over Delhi airport many years back, when the language was an issue, because one pilot could not understand the language of the air traffic control. And this became a very major case, and after that, International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, said English with a particular diction will be the language for airlines and airline pilots. So and after that, things improve, because once the air traffic control and the pilots are not able to communicate with the language they couldn't understand each other, it became very difficult and wrong decisions were taken. So I'm giving one example only of what should be the learning curve. Now, are the inquiries in India leading to any improvement in the system? We don't know, because these inquiries are not made public, and the result of that is also not known, that what improvements take place thereafter. So these are long-term issues, but they are very important issues which are required, which are followed elsewhere in the world. Whether we are doing it or not is something not known to the public or in the public domain.
Absolutely. Some very interesting points coming in from all three of you. We can at least, the end of this discussion, agree that the DGCA could certainly have done much more in order to avert this tragedy. Captain Singh, Dr. Kaul and Mr. Vaidya, thank you so much for joining us with your inputs.